cold air, meanwhile, across central Scotland. We can expect some snow above 400 or 500 metres. Feeling cold in the north, 5 or 6 Celsius at lower levels. It looks like it will be 12 or 13 in the south, so staying mild for England and Wales. Now, further showers drive through on Thursday evening, strengthening winds for Northern Ireland, Western Scotland and Irish Sea coast with gales in places. And it's a blustery end to the night, but with the wind coming from the northwest, it's going to be a fresher start, I think, for southern areas, even if it is frost-free. A brighter start, though, as well for the south and the east. Some sunshine at times on Friday morning, more especially into the afternoon. The skies brighten up more widely, but there'll be further showers affecting Northern Ireland, northern and western Scotland, parts of northern and central England, 1 or 2 for the southwest as well. In between the showers, we can expect it to stay breezy, and so that's going to have an effect on how it feels. It's going to feel quite chilly, I think, but temperatures slightly above average in the south, closer to normal further north. Further rain to come on Saturday, some heavy rain across North Wales and northwest England in particular. That clears to showers on Sunday, but also turns colder, with some of those showers turning to sleet and snow in Scotland.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Very good morning. Welcome to Bev Turner today on GB News. The Health Secretary will meet with NHS leaders today amid warnings that future strikes could put patients at risk. I'm going to be speaking at the top of the show to one woman who tragically lost her husband only last week after calling the ambulance 6 times. Her story really brings home the real effects of NHS strikes. Also, the big news questions that we constantly analyse in today's two-chart challenge. I'm asking, does the UK need more or less immigration? With two absolute experts, plus panellists Emma Webb and Ed Gamel. That's all coming up after a look at the latest news.
Good morning, it's 1 minute past 10. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The number of people in England waiting to start routine hospital treatment fell slightly in November, from a record 7.21 million in October to 7.19 million. The figures from NHS England come ahead of a meeting between the Health Secretary Steve Barclay and NHS leaders today. There are warnings future strikes could put patients at risk. NHS workers, including nurses, ambulance staff and physiotherapists, are due to walk out again later this month in a dispute over pay and conditions. Shadow Attorney General Emily Thornberry told GB News the only way to resolve the issue is for the government to sit down with unions and negotiate a deal.
Much better, surely, is to use the system that we already have, which is that people negotiate the basic safety levels, and you can see nurses running off picket lines in order to go and help when there is a particular crisis. Now, that's the reality. That's what's always happened. And we know that even if they do pass this legislation, it's not going to help with the current situation. The current situation can only be helped if the government stops playing games, sits down and talks to the unions and negotiates a deal.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister's promised to reduce NHS waiting times and to tackle illegal migration in his first political broadcast. Last night, Rishi Sunak blamed the COVID pandemic for creating the backlogs in the health service, but promised not to let those on the waiting list down. Mr Sunak also promised hard-headed common sense in approaching illegal migration. The Irish Premier and Labour leader will meet political parties at Stormont later in a bid to resolve the row over the Northern Ireland Protocol. Leo Varadkar and Sir Keir Starmer will travel to Belfast to discuss the post-Brexit deadlock over trade rules on the Irish land border. The protocol's become a contentious issue, with the DUP blocking the formation of a government until it's dramatically altered or removed. Russian mercenaries are claiming they've found a body belonging to one of the 2 British aid workers missing in Ukraine. The Wagner Group hasn't specified which of the 2's reportedly been found, but documents belonging to both Brits are understood to have been on the body. Ukrainian police say Andrew Bagshaw and Christopher Parry left the city of Kramatorsk for the town of Soledar on Friday morning and were reported missing on Saturday evening. GB News is unable to verify the claims. An energy watchdog says more than 3 million people in the UK ran out of credit on their prepayment meters last year. Citizens Advice says more than 2 million were being disconnected at least once a month, leaving them unable to turn the heating on or cook a meal. The charity is now calling for a total ban on forced prepayment meter installations until new protections are introduced. That is, the annual income needed for people to have a minimum standard of living when they retire has jumped by nearly a fifth in a year. The Pensions and Lifetime Savings Association says the lowest possible lifestyle cost for a single person has risen by 18% to almost £13,000. For a couple, it's gone up 19% to almost £20,000. Travel disruption continues for passengers in London today, with strikes on the newly opened Elizabeth line. Members from Transport Salaried Staffs Association and Prospect are walking off the job over pay and pensions. The 2 unions rejected a 4.4% increase this year. Transport for London has warned of short-notice cancellations and changes. More women will be able to get checked for breast cancer after the government announced £10 million in funding towards NHS screening units. The initiative will make screening more accessible for thousands of women, with 29 new units being set up. The investment will also see upgrades to ultrasound and X-rays to better detect cancer using new and improved software. Winds of up to 60 miles per hour expected in parts of the UK today. A yellow weather warning for heavy rain in Wales and southwest England is also in place until 5 this afternoon. The Met Office is warning of possible power cuts, dangerous driving conditions and delays to public transport. King Charles will carry out his first public engagement today since the release of Prince Harry's memoir, Spare. The King will travel to Aberdeenshire to visit the Aboyne and Mid-Deeside Community Shed, where he'll tour its new facilities and meet local support groups. His son, the Duke of Sussex's memoir, became the fastest-selling non-fiction book in history when it went on sale on Tuesday. And tributes continue to pour in for Jeff Beck, regarded as one of the greatest guitarists of all time. He died last night. Ozzy Osbourne says it was such an honour to know and play with him on his most recent album. Jimmy Page tweeted, "I'll miss you along with your millions of fans." The 8-time Grammy Award winner rose to fame as part of the Yardbirds in the 60s before forming the Jeff Beck Group with Rod Stewart. He was 78. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Bev.
Very good morning. Welcome to Bev Turner today on GB News. Here's what's coming up on the show this morning. On the day that NHS England release their performance statistics, I'm going to speak to Leslie Weekly. Her husband tragically had a heart attack last week, and it took 6 calls to the ambulance service before the paramedics arrived at her home in Wales, and she very sadly lost him, which is tragic, but I think it brings home the human face of these strikes, this industrial action. We're going to have also the 2-chart challenge. Now, this is where we try to answer the big news stories of our time. And it's one the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, should take a keen interest in if she's watching. 2 expert voices will join us with facts to back up their opposing opinions. And the question we want the answer to this morning is, does the UK need more immigration? And throughout my show, my panel will give their take on the day's top stories. Political commentator Emma Webb and leader of the Climate Party, Ed Gemmell, will join me in the studio in just a short while to go through the big news stories of the day. And of course, this show is nothing without you and your views. Don't forget to vote in our Twitter poll today, would you? Well, in light of our 2-chart challenge, I'm asking you, is legal immigration into the UK too high, too low, or about right? That's on Twitter at GB News. You can also email me your views, please, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me to have your say. All of that to come. This is the only place to be to find out what you need to know on, is it Thursday? Yeah, it's Thursday. It's been a long week. Now, a food blogger from Northamptonshire is encouraging people to save money and support British farmers by eating more seasonal vegetables. Millie Fife says that filling your plate with locally grown vegetables like Brussels sprouts and kale can help during the cost of living crisis. Last month, food inflation rose to more than 13%, the highest rate on record. Our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis, has more.
In Yelvertoft, the final few sprouts in Millie's garden are making their way onto the menu tonight. At a time when costs are increasing, the food blogging mum says eating seasonal veg grown locally instead of imported stuff can save you cash, and growing your own is even cheaper.
So at the moment we're in winter and brassicas are in season at the moment, so your Brussels sprouts and your kale, full of iron and vitamins, they're so fresh, and buying in season means that it's low food miles, but it also is cheaper on the purse as well.
Last month, food inflation rose to 13.3%, according to the British Retail Consortium, the highest rate on record.
Come on, girls. Come on.
As a farming family, Millie and her husband Andrew know firsthand how the cost of food is challenging consumers.
In this particular building, we've got some of this year's spring-born calves, which have recently been weaned. So they're just getting used to being inside now. They've come in because it's so wet outside now.
Andrew's been a farmer for 12 years.
The cost of production to produce these animals has more or less doubled to us in the last 18 months or so. The cost to the consumer, unfortunately, will have to go up, because if it doesn't go up, we will evidently stop doing it, so therefore food has to go up.
The UK food and farming industry pumps £120 billion into the economy. The National Farmers Union says that farmers produce healthy, affordable, quality food to world-leading standards, all while protecting and enhancing our precious countryside. And that buying British produce not only means you're supporting our farmers, but also that you're cutting down on food miles. Millie started blogging about the meals she makes to try and connect others with food grown by British farmers. Now she's released a new e-cookery book endorsed by Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal. It's filled with simple meals for busy parents.
For me, sausages are a real hero ingredient, and it's one of the things that I always have in my fridge or in my freezer. A packet of sausages can be as low as sort of £1.50, £2. For me, it's really important to be able to cook a meal from scratch and feed my family well using fresh seasonal produce, which I know that will make them happy and healthy. And all of these meals, they're quick, they're very easy, they're no fuss.
While increasing costs are unavoidable, the effect of rising prices doesn't have to mean a drop in the standard of your meals. Will Hollis for GB News in Yelvertoft.
Hello, you're watching Bev Turner today. You're listening to me also on the radio. My panel have joined me. I'm delighted to be in the studio today with Emma Webb, political commentator and leader of the Climate Party, Ed Gamel. Hi, guys. I've seen you in this show before, Ed, right in the beginning, haven't I? I knew Emma, but not together before. You're allowed to say exactly what you want, but you've got to be nice to each other. That's generally the rule. Right, Ed, let's start with a story in The Guardian. So, front page of The Guardian, fury as millions on prepaid energy meters plunged into cold and dark. I don't really understand this. Do you know who has a prepaid meter and why?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I'm reading the article like you. I'm not an expert on prepaid meters, but, I mean, it very much looks like those who are struggling, who are struggling to pay their heating bills and that sort of thing, are now getting prepayment meters foisted on them, which is actually increasing their costs.
Got it. OK, so an estimated 600,000 people were forced to make the switch away from credit meters after racking up debt with their energy suppliers in 2022.
They were, and there's a very interesting thing about the stats that come out from the article. I mean, there's about 350,000 of them that were forcibly installed through those stats, but they were mainly in 10 areas. So in terms of magistrates, out of the 150 magistrates in the country, only 10 of them are doing about 90% of grants for forced installations. And of those, almost 30% are in Portsmouth. Now, the story doesn't seem to dig into that. It was in the graphs and that were done. And it seems to me that there seems to be some more investigative journalism that needs to be done on that.
Absolutely. So it looks like, Emma, and the problem with these prepay meters is that they weren't then able to top them up.
Yeah, and it says here that 3.2 million people, the equivalent of one person every 10 seconds, was left with cold and dark homes as a result of this. A fifth of those on prepay reported going without heat or light for at least 24 hours. And some of the stories in this report are of people who weren't able to store their diabetics, not able to store their insulin in the fridge, people who had lung conditions who weren't able to use their lung breathing equipment. So this is having a serious impact on people's lives, and it seems to be a way of, as you were saying, of counteracting the debt that some people go into because of the high energy costs. But of course, these prepay meters are charging people at a much higher rate, and therefore, as a result, they're not able to afford it, and so they have to go without heat and without light.
So you're beholden to a sort of blackmailing energy system I mean, in a sense, that's what it is, isn't it? You're punished for not paying your bill on time.
I think you're probably right, but I think also if we take the sort of overall system of the energy problem and that sort of thing, why are we even here in the point we are? Yes, we know there's some global issues that have led to it and that sort of thing, but also if we've been installing solar into everywhere 20, 30 years ago, if we've been insulating our homes, if we went ahead and properly insulated 20 million UK homes, we wouldn't be having this issue, because those people that have got the problems would have lower bills, they'd have more comfortable homes to start off with, and we wouldn't be in that place.
Yeah. Where do you stand on money being spent by the state to insulate people's homes, Emma?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how feasible it is for there's so many homes around the country that I can imagine, and not, new build homes, of course, easy to insulate from the get-go, but there'll be all sorts of homes around the country that are not so straightforward to insulate.
You probably know the answer to that question, don't you, Ed Gemmell?
Well, I think if you're looking at it, it's probably about 2/3 of the homes are relatively easy to install. Relatively easy, OK, it takes training, takes scale, etc. But, I mean, what we've got to do is get at it. And at the moment, we've got a 60 billion that we put into the first sort of subsidies that we've had on our heat during the energy crisis now, and our energy crisis subsidies. That's going to go up. There's extensions of it, although it's been curtailed from what Liz Truss said. But if we spent that kind of money, we could be insulating, 10 million to 20 million British homes and potentially putting solar on top, removing the energy crisis pretty much from all those families, vastly from the country, and making it a whole lot easier for us on a whole lot of different counts.
It doesn't seem to be something that we should be spending public money on, though.
I have to say I completely disagree with you. I mean, I think it's public money that has to lead, public procurement that leads, but once public money sets the scene, gets the aims in place and starts the scale, then private money comes in. So it's always generated by government money or government direction, at least at the beginning.
Is it the kind of thing that should be means tested, maybe, Emma? A lot of these people who are on prepayment meters, who can't afford their bills, I quite like the idea of them having to pay less in the long term by having a really well-insulated house.
Yeah, I think you can't force people to insulate their homes if they don't want to. Those people who can afford to do it, if they want to do it, should. And those people who perhaps might like to but can't afford to, maybe there should be government grants available to them.
It feels like a really important long-term solution. Right. Yep. Somebody who appears not to have been thinking about the long term at all this week, Prince Harry, of course. This story's going on. Hopefully we've heard enough of the interviews for now from him. But we've been waiting to see, haven't we, how the royal family would respond. They haven't officially responded, Emma, but rumours are that the senior royals are saying that he will not be welcome at the coronation. Not really a surprise.
What a surprise, exactly. I think that the polite thing to do would be for them to be invited to the coronation and for them to politely decline. But I don't think that they have shown themselves to be dignified enough for us to expect that they do that.
That's such a beautifully English way, isn't it? We're not going to actually tackle the elephant in the room. We're going to invite you. You're going to send an RSVP saying, no, thank you, we're not available.
But it's interesting that they're afraid that they might end up in the paperback, which suggests that maybe they might do an update to spare once the coronation is out of the way. I think, this is totally reasonable. The ball, whatever Harry thinks, the ball is in his court. He has done something absolutely abominable to his family. It is not up for them to try and mend any bridges or hold out any olive branches. If he had any dignity, which I don't believe he has, he would stay well away from the coronation. I personally think that we should go the whole hog, strip them of their titles, remove them from the line of succession and send them into exile in California.
I think you're right. I do. I think you're right. We've been talking about this every day. Ed, the irony that the monster in his world, he literally calls evil, is the press. And he's cast himself as a tabloid journalist in the eyes of the royal family. They won't now have him at the parties.
Oh, I mean, I think the whole thing's ridiculous. And to some extent, the press will go with you. If you're going to keep pushing in that direction, the press will amplify it for you. So I think it's ridiculous. I mean, I really, really have to say that talking about this now, I'm utterly bored by the whole thing. I should think the majority of the British public are, and I just wish we weren't talking about it.
Well, I'm sorry, Ed Gemmell, you're here on my programme and you will talk about what I tell you to talk about. I said you have to be nice to each other.
Well, fair enough for that for the next minute or two. I'll be looking forward to
I've got some mileage in me for this.
Oh, no, don't worry. I'll hand it back to just in a second. I think one of the things that upsets me so much about it is that they're making a stack of money in doing it. Yeah. It doesn't seem wholly genuine, which is a worry about it. But even if you thought it was wholly genuine, there is a very, very very upset, in trouble, middle-aged man, I wouldn't call him a young man anymore, who really should just be dealing with his own stuff behind the scenes and not having to hang out his dirty washing in public. I mean, I'd like to think of my kids. I mean, if I thought my kids could have a fight, a couple of boys with each other, and then get paid 20 million for writing a biography, I might recommend the fight. But you know, I just think the whole thing's ridiculous. I would say, I think Emma's solution to whether they get invited and then they politely decline is poetic and would be a lovely way to do it. I think I would just say one comment on actually what we may do is that I think the father should be the one really making the decision, and the rest of us should just let him make it.
What a difficult situation between being the king and being the dad. Right, it's time for a quick break. We'll see you in a few minutes. We're going to speak after the break to Leslie Weekly. She's a lady whose husband died after she called the ambulance 6 times and they didn't make it. Don't go anywhere. You need to hear her story.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good morning, it's 10:22. This is Bev Turner today on GB News, TV, radio and online. Now, the Health Secretary will meet with NHS leaders today amid warnings that future strikes could put patients at risk. This comes as a record of 54,500 people waited more than 12 hours in A&E departments last month to be admitted, with average ambulance response times to call-outs in England last month the longest on record. But I think it's important to bring to life the real and very distressing repercussions of the actions of striking workers. This is a heartbreaking story. I want to introduce you now to Leslie Weekly. Good morning, Leslie. Thank you so much for joining us now.
Good morning.
We're so sorry for your loss, and I really appreciate you joining us so soon after you lost your husband. I think it's really important to make people understand the implications of these ambulance strikes. So would you mind just telling us what happened to you?
My husband woke me up about 1 o'clock saying he had indigestion. Can I get him a couple of tablets, which I did. But when I went to give them to him, he was slurring his words and he was almost incoherent and he was clammy and sweaty and ice cold. So I just straight away picked my phone up and dialed 999. And they said, well, a clinician will ring you back. If he deteriorates, ring us back. And I did that. Every time I rang, I said, he's deteriorating, he's getting worse. oh, well, a clinician will ring you. If he deteriorates, ring back. And then the third time I rang, I said, I can't feel his pulse. And I didn't know then he was still breathing, but I didn't know then what that meant. But the paramedics told me his body was shutting down, and it was the heart's way of protecting itself to take blood from the extremities, and that's why I couldn't get a pulse.
Right.
And then on the sixth phone call, still no phone call from the clinician, he stopped breathing while I was on the phone, and I dragged him off the bed and started doing CPR, and I was doing it for about 20 minutes, and I was exhausted. It's so hard to do, and I wasn't sure I was doing it correctly in the end because there was no strength left in my arms. And then the paramedics came and they were absolutely amazing, and they just would not give up. They just threw everything, and then they told me that he'd passed.
So the timings of this, Leslie, I think did you ring 999 about just after 2 o'clock in the morning?
Yes, no, it was 1:56 was the exact time, the first time, and it was 3:22 the sixth time.
So nearly an hour and a half you were ringing 999 6 times
and
alone.
They kept saying to me, the clinician will ring you, but he never did.
Alone with Rob, on your own, not knowing what to do.
No.
Was Rob otherwise well? Was he a well man? So it came out.
He'd never been to the doctors ever, and he was just so fit. And well, I can't, but none of us can believe it.
It's truly, truly heartbreaking. And when the paramedics arrived, Leslie, did they have any explanation as to why it had taken them so long to get to you?
No, they just received the call when they came to me. So
this wasn't actually on a day when there was an official strike even?
No.
This was just the poor service in your area?
Yeah.
What was he like?
The awful thing was the ambulances park up on a road near us. They join with the fire service, and the paramedics left about 5:30, I think. And my friend went to work at 5:50 past the ambulance park, and there were 15 ambulances there.
So tell us about Rob, Leslie. And what a loss this is for you.
He was just delightful, always on a level, never moody, very positive, always. Loved to debate, loved to chat. And all-round a great musician. And he was with London Welsh Male Voice Choir for 10 years. Just an all-round lovely guy.
And a real family man, I believe. So this will be a huge shock to all of you, not just for you, but for your whole family.
Absolutely. It just, every single person. Rob had no idea how much he was loved and in the wider community, and how people held him in high esteem. And the flowers and cards and phone calls that we've had, it's just been amazing, and he just was so unassuming. He just an all-round lovely guy.
And the paramedics, I understand, Leslie, did say to you that if we'd got here earlier, he would have had a really good chance.
If they'd have called, if they were dispatched after my first phone call, he would have survived.
Have you had any feedback from the local trust? Have you made any sort of official complaint? Are you considering any sort of legal action or investigation at all?
I haven't really thought about it, to be honest. I got up in the early hours of the morning and sent an email to Rishi Sunak, the chief exec of the NHS Federation, and just saying I wanted answers because I'm just at a loss, and at the moment I just feel numb.
I bet you do. I know. It's so hard. It's so difficult. But I think what you're doing, speaking out, is really important, because we talk about strikes a lot and we see people on picket lines, and we know the NHS is in a terrible state, but it can be sometimes quite hard to make the connection between what we're seeing on the political sphere. We see MPs fighting about it in the House of Commons, and I think stories like yours, Leslie, and Rob, it's an important
But we're not unique. We've just become a statistic, and the more this goes out, the more you hear of people going through more or less the same thing. And why can't all the political parties get together, not just the one that's in power at the moment, but all of them, and just make radical changes?
I don't want to keep you too long, Leslie, because I know this is such a difficult conversation to have, but we've all grown up in a country, haven't we, where we just presume that when you ring 999 in an emergency, that an ambulance will come. We've just taken that for granted, maybe. What was it like? Just explain that sense when you're waiting for the ambulance, of the emotions that you were going through.
Well, I was sort of trying to see Rob, and I didn't have a chance to cuddle him because... Sorry.
It's all right. It's all right. Thank you. It's all right, Leslie. I think it's incredibly brave. Take a breath.
And this morning, funny enough, I was thinking about it, and I forget who it was said to me, did you mention a heart attack when you first phoned? And I honestly couldn't remember if I did. But the fact that they told me, first of all, to give him 4 aspirins to chew, and when I went to do it, he started vomiting. So she said, don't give him the aspirin, but if he deteriorates, ring 999 again. And so he was getting worse, and I phoned again, and it was a male call handler, and he said, give him the aspirins, but make sure he chews them. So they must have known it was a heart problem for them to recommend me giving him aspirin.
Yeah, that was clearly the suspicion, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Leslie, I'm so sorry. We're so sorry. But thank you so much. Honestly, I know this is a really hard conversation, but I think it's incredibly important, because we talk about it, we talk about this issue, we talk about the NHS politically, theoretically, in terms of policy, but to see the human tragedy and suffering because of this, I think is incredibly powerful. Leslie Weekly, thank you so much. Leslie, who lost her husband.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, my love. Now, Liam Williams, Executive Director of Quality and Nursing at the Welsh Ambulance Service, has said, we are really sorry to hear about such a distressing incident, and we send our deepest condolences to Mrs. Weekly and her family. This is not the service we aim to deliver, and we know that this must have been a very upsetting and traumatic experience for Mrs. Weekly. We will be contacting Mrs. Weekly to listen to her concerns, investigate the circumstances of our response to Mr. Weekly, and answer any questions that she might have. The pressures on services across the NHS and social care are well documented. They go on, we recognise that too many patients are having a poor experience of our service, which is something that we are extremely concerned about. We're working hard with Health Board colleagues and Welsh Government to find solutions to long waits in the community for ambulances, but these issues are complex and not easily fixed, dependent as they are on so many elements. In the meantime, we send our sincere condolences to Mrs. Weekly and her family, and we will be in touch with her shortly. Right, we're going to be back after the morning news.
It's coming up to 10:34. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Ambulance response times in England last month were the longest on record. Newly released NHS England data shows it took an average of an hour and a half to respond to call-outs in December. The latest figures also found the number of people waiting more than 12 hours to be admitted to A&E has risen above 50,000 for the first time. The figures come ahead of a meeting between the Health Secretary Steve Barclay and health leaders today in an attempt to resolve pay disputes. Shadow Attorney General Emily Thornberry told GB News it's the only way to resolve the issue.
Much better, surely, is to use the system that we already have, which is that people negotiate the basic safety levels, and you can see nurses running off picket lines in order to go and help when there is a particular crisis. Now, that's the reality. That's what's always happened. And we know that even if they do pass this legislation, it's not going to help with the current situation. The current situation can only be helped if the government stops playing games, sits down and talks to the unions and negotiates a deal.
The Irish Premier and Labour leader will meet political parties at Stormont later in a bid to resolve the row over the Northern Ireland Protocol. Leo Varadkar and Sir Keir Starmer will travel to Belfast to discuss the post-Brexit deadlock over trade rules on the Irish land border. The DUP is blocking the formation of a government until the protocol is dramatically altered or removed. Russian mercenaries are claiming to have found a body belonging to one of the 2 British aid workers missing in Ukraine. The Wagner Group hasn't specified which of the 2's reportedly been found, but did say documents belonging to both Brits had been found on the body. Ukrainian police say Andrew Bagshaw and Christopher Parry left the city of Kramatorsk for Solidar on Friday morning. They were reported missing on Saturday evening. GB News is unable to verify the claims. And tributes continue to pour in for Jeff Beck, regarded as one of the greatest guitarists of all time. He died last night. Ozzy Osbourne says it was such an honour to know and play with him on his most recent album. The 8-time Grammy Award winner rose to fame as part of the Yardbirds in the 60s before forming the Jeff Beck Group with Rod Stewart. He was 78. TV online and DAB Plus Radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Bev will be back in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel. Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back to Bev Turner Today on GB News. A lot of you sending in your views. Let me know what you think of that story of that lady as well, Leslie Weekly, that we just spoke to, who lost her husband, Rob, because the ambulance didn't arrive in time. It's the stuff of nightmares, isn't it? And as Leslie said, she's not alone. There are more cases like this. Now, we were just talking earlier about energy bills and about prepaid meters, and Ed Gemmell, leader of the Climate Party, who's here with me, was saying that actually a lot of old properties, a lot of properties should be insulated. And Nick has said old properties are not suitable for excessive insulation method. These properties need to breathe, as they will sweat and then cause damp issues as the airflow is reduced. Good point, Nick. John says the majority of homes getting insulated are social housing, council houses. People like myself, who has a working family income of £23,000 but owns my own home, I could not afford to get proper insulation for my house. But someone could be on the same money on benefits in a council house and will get it all. Good point, John. Keep your views coming. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, it's time for the two-chart challenge. Now, this is where we try to get to the bottom of the big news issues of our day. They may not necessarily be on the front pages every day, but it's certainly the kind of thing that we discuss with our mates, isn't it? The kind of thing we need to have an answer to. And today I'm asking, does the UK need more immigration? So two expert voices are joining me now with facts to back up their opposing opinions. Let me introduce them to you. Social policy analyst Dr. Rakib Eshan and the former Australian Foreign Minister Alexander Downer. Good morning, gentlemen. Lovely to see you. Right, Rakib, let me start with you. Do we need more legal immigration in this country?
I think that the one thing we really need to focus on is reducing our dependence on immigration when it comes to our economic development. I've said for some time that one of the greatest failures of Conservative-led governance over the past 12 years is boosting skills in our domestic workforce. And I think you saw that with the relatively short Truss government, where you heard ideas of trying to fuel or engineer quick growth through high levels of immigration. I just don't think that's the way forward in terms of trying to foster a more durable and stronger economy. And there's also the discussion in terms of what kind of impact that can have on social cohesion in modern Britain.
OK. Alexander Downer, just respond to that as your opening gambit.
Well, I don't have an opposite view to that. I mean, some of that I do agree with. I think what you need is a coherent and comprehensible immigration policy. So it's a good thing to have migrants if you want, for example, to inject more dynamism from abroad into the economy. You want to fill gaps, particularly amongst skilled workers in the workforce. Although it's true, you have to spend time training up your own people. Young British people need to be trained to fill special jobs, but it's a slightly different point. You can't do that overnight. So you need to work out very carefully how many migrants you need, and you also need to work out how many migrants you can absorb, because this programme this morning has focused very much on the problems of the NHS and the ambulance service. If you just bring people in willy-nilly into the country, you'll put all of those sorts of services, and in addition education and the like, under huge pressure, not to mention housing and the effect that this all has on housing prices. So you need to have a coherent immigration policy, and you need to cap the number of migrants that are brought into the country so that you balance all of these things effectively.
OK, Rakib, the UK saw similar levels of migration compared to other high-income countries, hasn't it? Let's just have a look at a chart here. So what does this tell us, and what do we take from it in terms of the positives and the negatives of immigration?
Well, if I'm looking at that graph correctly, that's referring to the foreign-born population as a share of the overall population. I think that when looking at recent figures, the most recent net migration figure was 504,000, which is exceptionally high. But that's largely down to one-off factors such as bespoke resettlement routes for Ukrainians fleeing the Kremlin-led invasion of their country, and also a bespoke resettlement route for Hong Kongers fleeing Chinese state tyranny. And there was also the recent removal of the post-COVID flow of international students coming in after those travel restrictions associated with the pandemic were removed. But I think that more broadly, what we need to talk about is we need to have a well-structured immigration system which does address urgent gaps in the labour market, but we need to have a more longer-term approach in terms of the kind of economy that we have, in terms of economic sustainability. And that does involve an active industrial strategy, which includes boosting skills in the domestic workforce and reducing our dependence on immigration in the long term.
Alexander, so last year, net migration to the UK was unusually high. Do we know why that was?
Well, I think you just heard there were some one-off factors there. This was in reaction very substantially to COVID and all the restrictions of COVID, people coming back, students taking up positions that they couldn't take up because of COVID restrictions, and then the Ukraine war, the Ukrainian refugees, Afghan refugees after President Biden pulled out of Afghanistan. So there were those one-off factors which wouldn't necessarily be repeated. I wouldn't draw too many conclusions from that 1 year's figures. But I think what is wrong with the British immigration system is that it is insufficiently planned in terms of skilled migrants in particular. What sort of skilled migrants does the UK need? How many does it need? How many can it absorb? And let's not take more than the number of skilled migrants that we can absorb, so we don't push up housing prices, put the NHS under more pressure, put schools under more pressure. And let's take some refugees, let's resettle refugees, but let's stop people gaming the system and coming illegally, for example, across the Channel. But, you know, you do need to introduce a system of caps on immigration and a coherent strategy for immigration. That is the best way to do it. Then immigration can work for the country, can work for the economy, and the public will be satisfied with it. The public won't be against immigration full stop. They are against chaotic immigration, unplanned, unregulated immigration. That's what the public don't want.
Rakib, what's the main reason that non-EU migrants come to the UK? Because that's where we've seen the increase in the last couple of years. Are they coming here mainly to study?
Well, that would be a massive factor in terms of their educational aspirations. And one of the things we do have in our country, we have a highly respected university system, especially across the Commonwealth. So that'll be one factor. And then, to be honest, there'll be other factors. Many non-EU migrants originate from countries where there isn't a great deal of social stability. Many of these countries are suffering from long-standing civil unrest, not particularly sharp forms of governance, and the economic opportunities are simply not there. So much of the reason will be for looking for a better life. But I think I'd often make this point that it's not Britain's role to maximise global welfare. It's something that I say quite often in my writings. But what it needs is a well-structured immigration system which contributes positively to our economy, and we have the social infrastructure in place to absorb newcomers so that they can live a proper life and contribute positively in the economic, cultural and social spheres of British life.
OK, well, a lot to agree on there, gentlemen. Thank you very much, Alexander Downer and Dr Rakib Eshan. Let me know what you think, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, my panel are still here, political commentator Emma Webb and leader of the Climate Party, Ed Gemmell. Right, now, Emma, first of all, just about reference to that, what's your feeling about immigration? Do we have it about right? There wasn't a lot to argue with there, really, was there?
As a country, I think we've got it all wrong. I think that was an eminently reasonable discussion. I think that one key aspect that came out in that discussion is that very often the way that the migration debate is framed is so that on the one hand you have these sort of rabid racists who don't want anyone to come in, and on the other hand you have open borders. But the reality is that the majority of people in this country want limited, reasonable immigration. No one's saying no immigration at all. Some people might like a moratorium with the doors being closed for a certain period of time so that there's time to adjust and integration can happen. But most people have a very reasonable view on just simply wanting limited immigration. And I think that's where the discussion should be happening, which is sort of in the bounds of what everyday people think.
Yeah. What do you think, Ed, leader of the Climate Party? What would your policy be on immigration?
I think we've got to look at two things. I think business needs the right people coming in now. So there's no question about that. We need to get the right skilled people in, and we need to get them in at the right levels, and we need them now while we need them to work. I think on the longer term, we've got a massive train crash coming down the line. We will get mass migration happening all over the world as climate change unfolds, as sub-Saharan Africa and many other areas, even south of Spain and Italy, that become uninhabitable. And the 40,000 or the 50,000 we're getting coming across the channel at the moment, we will be inundated.
Oh, Ed, that's not going to happen anytime soon.
And we need to solve it. Well, but we need to take the action now in order to not see it happening in a decade or two's time. So we can't wait.
What, in a decade or more? 500 years?
Oh, no, 500 years is absolute rubbish. I mean, if it's out 2 decades, then that would be a long time.
OK.
I mean, the effects are coming down the line now. The desertification is already happening. People are already moving, but currently they're internally displaced.
Right.
But as countries become unable to actually keep them internally, they're going to move. And we will, for all the effects we're going to have, we'll have the better climate compared to most for quite a long time. They're going to come here.
So we need to take green action now, Emma, to stop immigration in 20 years' time.
On all things, I take a sort of sceptical position.
I find that puts us in good stead in life, Emma Webb.
I remain unconvinced by the catastrophism over climate. I think that the reasons why we need to deal with immigration isn't, you can merge all sorts of different issues together. The reason why we need to deal with immigration now is because of its impact on people's lives, its impact on their homes. That's what people are concerned about and have been concerned about and ignored over for decades.
It's a tough sell, your kind of vision for the world, Ed, isn't it? Like, that's a tough sell to tell people we need to stop. We need to take climate action now in order to limit immigration in 20 years.
Oh, no, it's all about profit. You take the action now to make sure you profit more in the future and you have greater prosperity. I mean,
that's a much easier sell.
There are no businesses that take action simply to limit their damage. They take action in order to increase their profit in the future. So let's plan right, invest now, get the private investment going in many, many different areas, and then profit from it rather than be scared of it. But we have to recognise that there are those issues that are coming and prepare for them now.
OK, we could go on and on, but we're still talking about money. Right, retirement. Emma Webb, this is a long way away for you. Are you planning for it now? This is a story that is in all the papers today. How much do you need for a decent retirement? The cost of a basic lifestyle soars almost 20% to £12,800 as inflation hits poorer pensioners the hardest.
This has made me a little bit worried,
well,
I'll be honest.
I like to think you've got a piggy bank for your pension going.
I'm a saver for sure, but this is not something that I've had at the forefront of my mind. There have been points at which I've actively opted out of paying into a pension pot through a company and that kind of thing.
Really?
And I think I'm probably in good company. I think
How old
many
are you?
people, 29.
Right, OK.
And I think many of please correct me on Twitter if I'm wrong, but I think many of my peers in my generation are probably of the same mind. They're thinking about the situation now. Cost of living is very high. People are thinking about their financial situation, to buy a house, to have a family, and all of these things, and not necessarily thinking as far ahead as what they're going to do when they reach retirement. And also because things seem so uncertain so far in the future, we have no idea even if there will be a state pension by that point. But the statistics in this report that the cost of a basic lifestyle is up by 20% to £12,800 a year, which I find quite surprising because I can't imagine, unless you already own your property, how surviving off of £12,800 a year would give you a basic lifestyle.
Well, is that not because you're 29, so you eat out with Deliveroo every night and expect to get Ubers everywhere? I'm right, aren't I? You know, my 19-year-old son, you know, him and his mates, they go through money like it's going out of fashion, she says, sounding like her own mother. You know, the idea that they might compromise and go without something in order to save. What do you think, Ed? Isn't it all like profligate youngsters like Emma just blowing all their money rather than saving for a pension?
No, I think particularly if you're looking at London and that sort of thing, I mean, if you don't, as Emma says, if you don't have a property that you own, look at what you're paying on rent. Even if you've just got a single room in London, and how much of this have you then got left in order to keep yourself going? So, and the same in, you know, much of the areas around London. So that does worry me vastly, and it worries me that we're probably not looking after the vulnerable as much as we should be. Yeah. There's a system which we have which is meant to do that, but it clearly isn't working. How we change it? I'm not an expert in this area.
So I presume you have a pension pot?
I'm really doing mine through property.
Yours through your property?
Yeah, just through my property. So that's the main area. You don't earn very much doing climate. Well, there's plenty of people who actually reckon that I'm...
quite a lot of people making a lot of money out of the green agenda.
Well, and online...
As you said, there's some profit to be made.
Well, absolutely. Online, they seem to think that my salary is being paid by the World Economic Forum, but I keep wondering who it is who's paying it, because I haven't seen the money yet.
But I wonder whether there is a cultural problem here, because, well, this article is pointing out the fact that there is, that it is getting more expensive. We are living longer. We're going to want to do things in our old age, and yet I think my generation were all taught to, you know, consider and plan a bit for the future. Mm-hmm. There is something about you lot being all very like in the moment, instant gratification, failing to look ahead. Why?
I'm not sure how true that is. So I think that's certainly true of some people, but I don't think that you could say that in general.
Oh, I'm making a broad generalisation about all
And the
young
reason is, as I
people.
said, I'm a saver. I'm a penny pincher. Yeah. And I think because my generation have grown up with so much financial uncertainty, and it can send you in either direction. Either the idea that it's almost impossible for you to own a home, either that sends you in the direction of thinking, oh, well, screw it, I'm going to just spend my money anyway.
That's right.
Or you focus all of your attention on saving every single penny.
You can be quite fatalistic about it, can't you? Right, OK, we've got to the end of our first hour. Next, we're going to get stuck into Rishi Sunak's impassioned address to the nation. I thought it was a bit flat, personally, but first, here's your weather.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. Wet weather in the south, clearing away today. Blustery showers across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some sunny spells in between. Here's the big picture. Low pressure is dominating, and these weather fronts brought some fairly heavy rain through the morning, and still some downpours to come across parts of southern England through the afternoon. Moving through, though, and clearing away slowly but surely. Still pretty blustery as well. A few showers over northern England, plenty of showers for northern parts of Northern Ireland and western Scotland, with some snow on the hills. A gusty, blustery feel. As I said, in between, some places that'll be dry and bright this afternoon, and temperatures are going to be above average, although actually turning cooler quite quickly through this evening, and feeling cooler with the winds. Speaking of the winds, they really pick up tonight across Northern Ireland, then North Wales and northern parts of England. We do have Met Office yellow warning in place. Those winds could cause some disruption, certainly likely to wake you up through the night. Showers rattling through on that wind as well. That wind will help to keep the temperatures up. Close to freezing in northern Scotland, where the showers will be falling as snow once more over the hills. Further south, it'll be a quieter day, I think a calmer day during Friday. A blustery, windy morning, certainly, with still a few showers for Northern Ireland, northwest England, North Wales, and some wetter weather, especially during the afternoon over southwest Scotland. Mixture of sunny spells and showers over northern Scotland. But much of the south, I think, will have a largely dry day with sunny spells. Temperatures close to average, but again, feeling a bit cooler with the wind. Now, the winds will be easing through the afternoon and into the evening, but then another pulse of rain is likely to arrive during Friday evening over parts of Wales, Northern Ireland, spreading into Scotland, and there's more rain waiting behind me to come in during Saturday. So another wet spell. The weather, though, is calming down, but turning colder as we go into next week. Sundays on GB News from 9:30, it's Camilla Tominey.
For a politics show with personality.
Then at 11, Michael Portillo.
For topical discussion, debate, some ethical dilemmas, and sometimes even a sense of the ridiculous.
And at 1 p.m, me, Alistair Stewart. Every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Very good morning. Welcome back to Bev Turner today on GB News, radio, online and on your telly, of course. You know that if you're watching me. Now, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak set out 5 targets of his first major speech of 2023, pledging to halve inflation and bring down the NHS waiting list. But can he deliver on these promises? We're going to be discussing that. We're also going to be talking about the online safety bill and if tech giants should be blamed for letting harmful content slip out onto the internet. I'm going to be joined by advocate of the bill, friend of the show and Conservative MP Miriam Cates. That's all coming up after a look at the latest news.
Good morning, it's 1 minute past 11. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Ambulance response times in England last month were the longest on record. Newly released NHS England data shows it took an average of an hour and a half to respond to call-outs in December. The latest figures also found the number of people waiting more than 12 hours to be admitted to A&E had risen above 50,000 for the first time. The figures come ahead of a meeting between the Health Secretary Steve Barclay and health leaders today in an attempt to resolve pay disputes. Shadow Attorney General Emily Thornberry told GB News it's the only way to resolve the issue.
Much better, surely, is to use the system that we already have, which is that people negotiate the basic safety levels, and you can see nurses running off picket lines in order to go and help when there is a particular crisis. Now, that's the reality. That's what's always happened. And we know that even if they do pass this legislation, it's not going to help with the current situation. The current situation can only be helped if the government stops playing games, sits down and talks to the unions and negotiates a deal.
Leslie Weekly from Barry told us her husband Rob died last Wednesday after waiting 2 hours for an ambulance to arrive.
If they were dispatched after my first phone call, he would have survived. I got up in the early hours of the morning and sent an email to Rishi Sunak, the chief exec of the NHS Federation, and just saying I wanted answers.
The Irish Premier and Labour leader are meeting political parties at Stormont today in a bid to resolve the row over the Northern Ireland Protocol. Leo Varadkar and Sir Keir Starmer are discussing the post-Brexit deadlock over trade rules on the Irish land border. The DUP's blocking the formation of a government until the protocol's dramatically altered or removed. Russian mercenaries are claiming they've found a body belonging to one of the 2 British aid workers missing in Ukraine. The Wagner Group hasn't specified which of the 2's reportedly been found, but documents belonging to both Brits are understood to have been found on the body. Ukrainian police say Andrew Bagshaw and Christopher Parry were last seen heading to the town of Solidar on Friday morning. They were reported missing on Saturday evening. GB News is unable to verify the claims. An energy watchdog says more than 3 million people in the UK ran out of credit on their prepayment meters last year. Citizens Advice says more than 2 million were being disconnected at least once a month, leaving them unable to turn the heating on or cook a meal. The charity is calling for a total ban on forced prepayment meters installations until new protections are introduced. And the annual income needed for people to have a minimum standard of living when they retire has jumped by nearly a fifth in a year. The Pensions and Lifetime Savings Association says the lowest possible lifestyle cost for a single person has risen by 18% to almost £13,000. For a couple, it's gone up 19% to almost £20,000. Travel disruption continues for passengers in London today with strikes on the newly opened Elizabeth line. Members for Transport Salaried Staffs Association and Prospect are walking off the job over pay and pensions. The 2 unions rejected a 4.4% increase this year. Transport for London has warned of short notice cancellations and changes to services. More women will be able to get checked for breast cancer after the government announced £10 million in funding towards NHS screening units. The initiative will make screening more accessible for thousands of women, with 29 new units being set up. The investment will also see upgrades to ultrasound and X-rays to better detect cancer using new and improved software. Ukrainian authorities say Russia has attacked a maternity hospital in the port city of Kherson. Video footage shows the aftermath of the strike, with heavy damage to windows and offices. It comes after President Zelensky praised the resilience of his forces in the eastern Donbass region. Back here, winds of up to 60 miles per hour are expected in parts of the UK today. A yellow weather warning for heavy rain in Wales and southwest England is also in place until 5 this afternoon. The Met Office is warning of possible power cuts, dangerous driving conditions and delays to public transport. And King Charles is carrying out his first public engagement since the release of Prince Harry's memoir Spare today. The King will travel to Aberdeenshire to visit the Aboyne and Mid-Deeside Community Shed, where he'll tour its facilities, its new facilities, and meet local support groups. The Duke of Sussex's memoir became the fastest-selling non-fiction book in history when it went on sale on Tuesday. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Bev.
Very good morning. Welcome to Bev Turner today on GB News. More and more of you are finding us every single day. If you like what we do us a favour and tell one person today, won't you? We've got to spread the word. Now, here's what's coming up on this morning's show. The Prime Minister has pledged to reduce the NHS waitlist and tackle illegal immigration in his first party political broadcast of 2023. Sunak blamed the pandemic for creating backlogs in the health service. I don't think it's as simple as that, Rishi. But will he get to grips and meet all of his targets? Let me know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.uk. We're going to be talking to Darian McCaffrey about this in just a moment. The online safety bill is back amongst debates, but should big tech companies be held accountable for protecting children from harmful online content? I'm going to be joined shortly by the superb Conservative MP, Miriam Cates. She's a big advocate of the bill and she will tell us where we're up to. And I'm going to be joined back in the studio by the smartest guests on TV in about 15 minutes with a look at the day's biggest stories, political commentator Emma Webb and leader of the Climate Party, Ed Gemmell. And of course, I want all of your thoughts and views as well. Today on Twitter, we've got a poll asking you whether illegal immigration in the UK is too high, too low, or about right. Keep your votes coming in. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk to have your say. So the Prime Minister has pledged to reduce the NHS waiting list and tackle immigration in his first party political broadcast of 2023. Did you see it? Rishi Sunak blamed the pandemic for creating backlogs in the health service, but he promised to not let down those who are on the waiting list. He also reiterated his hard-headed, common sense approach to tackling both the NHS and the economy. Let's take a look.
Under my leadership, the government's priorities are your priorities, the people's priorities. Together, we're putting your needs above politics to repair the economy, strengthen our NHS, tackle illegal migration, and restore pride in the United Kingdom, our great country.
OK, well, joining me for more analysis on this is GB News political editor Darren McCaffrey. Good morning, Darren. So this is the tone of Rishi Sunak's party political broadcast. It was very statesmanlike. He was looked like he was locked in a bit of a basement with two Union Jack flags behind him. I wasn't sure who'd kidnapped him when I saw that. How's it been received down there in Westminster?
Yeah, addressing the nation, I think, Bev, it was branded as, but it is a party political broadcast. Now, all political parties get to have one. We're not like the United States where you're allowed to advertise on the television, if you like, with different political campaign ads. Rather, the state, BBC and ITV and others, give 5 minutes every so often to the different party political leaders to make their case. And as you say, Rishi Sunak's case was all about his 5 priorities he talks about, most notably on the National Health Service and on the small boats crisis in the English Channel, trying to get both of those figures down, if you like, in terms of waiting lists and also the numbers of people crossing the Channel. I think the big question, of course, for the Prime Minister is, yes, it's all very well and good saying you want to get these things down, but what are the actual targets you're trying to achieve and by when? Frankly, because there is not an awful lot of transparency when it comes to all of this. So when you look at some of the detail this morning with the National Health Service in England, it's pretty grim reading, it must be said, all round for the government, with new figures now showing that more than half of people who turn up to A&E in England are having to wait more than 4 hours. So, you know, A&E, when you go to A&E, it's pretty serious. It's called accident and emergency, and yet more than half of people turning up, Bev, are not being seen within 4 hours. On top of that, the number of people being seen by ambulances, so just paramedics turning up at your door if you've had a category A, so that's life-threatening emergency call, was 10 minutes and 57 seconds. But category 2, this is extraordinary. These are people who've had heart attacks and strokes, and for the first time, their wait time was over an hour and a half. The target's 18 minutes.
Awful,
Not a heart attack or stroke, you call 999. The average waiting time is an hour and a half. It's extraordinary.
And you know, Darren, we've had an exclusive interview this morning with one lady who lost her husband when she waited 90 minutes and called the ambulance 6 times, and the paramedics said if they'd arrived earlier, he would have survived, and he died of a heart attack. Going back to this party political broadcast that Rishi Sunak gifted to us yesterday, he does have this unfortunately kind of man-child demeanour. And is there a sense that he's going to lose the next election for the Conservatives if they don't do something about him? Boris Johnson, of course, never very far away from the political scene, is kind of loitering in the wings. The press are starting to, some of the left-wing press are starting to stick the knife into him again. What's the feeling down there at Westminster? Should Rishi be worried? Because effectively they've got to get in a general election footing fairly soon.
Yeah, I mean, that general election has to happen, well, within the next 2 years. I mean, the last possible time, I mean, taking it to the very end of this Parliament, will be January 2025. Now, the expectation is the election will happen next year, either in the spring. I might suggest it'll probably be as late as the autumn of 2024. Yeah, Rishi Sunak in that video last night, you know, many people, a bit like when he first became Prime Minister, think he can be a little bit stilted, not terribly comfortable in that role. Actually, he's much better just dealing off the cuff and talking with people than he is in reading auto cues and staring down the barrel of a camera. In fact, actually, I'd say he's getting better at PMQs than he is at that presentational style. At the end of the day, of course, being Prime Minister isn't all about presentation. It's not how you all seem on TV or on social media. It's about the actual decisions you make. But within the Conservative Party, yes, of course. You know, Rishi Sunak essentially became Prime Minister, didn't he, without the formal backing of the political party. There was no actual vote. There was no vote amongst the membership, and there is disquiet. Of course, this is a party that is deeply divided. The opinion polls haven't swung back as much as many Conservative MPs would like. Rishi Sunak, though, personally is more popular than the Conservative Party. As for Boris Johnson, he was in London the other night unveiling a portrait to himself when he was Prime Minister. I think he would like us to think that he might potentially come back. For me personally, I think it's really, really unlikely to change Conservative leader again. I'm not entirely sure a lot of the public would buy that, even if it was Boris Johnson. And I think the Conservative Party almost certainly, never guarantee anything in politics, Bev, but almost certainly will have Rishi Sunak leading them into the next election.
Thank you, Darren. Well, we are in the best pair of hands there with our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Anything that happens, you will hear it here first. Now, as one of his 5 pledges to the British public that we did see on that slightly stilted video, Rishi Sunak has promised to bring growth back to Britain. I think that's what Liz Truss wanted as well, isn't it? But then she got kicked out for that idea. Trading figures for the festive season are in for supermarket chains Tesco and M&S. At a glance, they make good reading. Liam Halligan, don't tell me you're here to give me some good news, because that would be a first.
There is some good news here. I do try. I don't mean to be the dismal scientist, which economists
you
often...
are always a ray of sunshine into my studio.
I just try and tell it as it is.
That's why we get on well. Right, what's happened?
So Tesco's Britain's biggest retailer, of course, dominates the supermarket landscape. It has been losing market share, as we've been reporting here on GB News, to the discounters like Aldi and Lidl. Waitrose also has been losing market share, but as a mid-market brand, Tesco has been fighting back, bringing some of its own discounts in. It's just chalked up 2 successive quarters of growth, the first time that that's happened in 5 years, with lockdown and all the rest of it. And also we saw 5.3% rise in like-for-like sales on the previous year in the months before Christmas for Tesco. Now, I'm seeing lots of headlines that M&S has done really well as well, and its food sales have been pretty good. But I must say, its clothing and home department actually saw a 25% drop in sales over 3 months before Christmas. So it is actually a mixed picture. But what I would say is M&S tends to be, for all its fabulous success over many years, it is, of course, a British institution. It tends to be a bit more of an upmarket place, doesn't it, for the polite society, the middle classes, if they want to get...
The home counties.
Some expensive kitchenware or so on. And they do seem to have suffered as the cost of living squeeze has come in, as more and more of us trying to make ends meet are looking for a bargain.
Well, have you been in the dresses department of Marks and Spencer's recently?
I'm there most Saturday afternoons, as you know, Bev.
Because I cannot find anything I would want to wear in there. I walk around Marks and Spencer's clothing department and just think, who is designing these clothes? Who are these for? Who's going to wear that? There were adult pyjamas with, like, Mickey Mouse on them at Christmas. Who's going to wear that?
I've got a Mickey Mouse onesie, actually. But that's
oh, no.
That is God, it's a morning of confessions, is it? I'm in the dress department. No. Obviously, M&S goes in cycles. Sometimes its clothes are very much on point and they hit a rich seam.
Great bras.
And other times, of course, they tend to go off the boil as fashion ebbs and flows, and a huge business tries to keep up. What I would say, and I don't want to pour cold water on what are generally pretty good sales from 2 of our biggest retailers, of course, who employ, between them tens of thousands of people and keep the end up on lots of British high streets in towns and cities. We want these stores to succeed. We want to celebrate their success on GB News. But I wouldn't be Liam Halligan unless I pointed out that even though these headline figures are very good, they are less than the rate of inflation, which is, of course, 10 or 11%. So even though the amount of money people are spending is going up by 5%, 6%, in real terms, in terms of the goods they're actually getting, the volume of goods, they're falling because the value of their money is being eroded.
That's what I was just going to say.
And this is what inflation does. It turns really good headline figures, when you look under the bonnet, as it were, into rather more concerning headline figures. And we have to point that out too.
So it's not necessarily that they've sold more stuff. They've sold stuff and had more income from that, but that's because the prices were higher.
That's right. So they've sold lower volumes. That's right. But the amount, the absolute number of pounds and pence has gone up. But they're lower volumes and consumers are getting less because stuff is more expensive. Particularly food. We know that food price inflation is more like 15 or even 20%. We know that from the likes of the British Retail Consortium. We even know that from the Office for National Statistics numbers.
Is it all valid, that, Liam? I was at the supermarket. I was at Tesco's last night, actually, and I was chatting to my checkout
Picking
lady.
up a few bits?
I was
You're
picking
going
up
for a few bits. You spent £100.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And I was chatting to the checkout lady because I deliberately do the one with a human being on it because I quite like human beings. That tends to be a theme of this show. And so we were having a little chat and she was pretty straight. Oh, look at the olive oil. That's gone up. Oh, look at the bread. That's gone up. And she was... And I said to her, are they taking the mickey? They don't need to be charging these prices now, do they?
I wouldn't cast aspersions on any of our main high street food retailers. And I'd say, Bev, there is a lot of profiteering going on. There is a lot of what we call price gouging. There are lots of companies in the UK and elsewhere who use an inflationary environment to take the mickey, shall we say, on daytime television. I don't think that the food retailers are into that category. I do think food retailing in this country is broadly pretty competitive. We're seeing how Aldi and Lidl are being rewarded for their discounting strategies, and we're seeing the mid-market brands, your Tesco's, Sainsbury's, Asda, even Waitrose, more upmarket, responding. Where there is competition, consumers benefit. And I do think we have retail competition among our food retailers. Farmers would say they get a raw deal, but I think consumers get a decent deal. Where there isn't decent competition, if I may say so, this is a point of view, they would deny it, of course, Your Honour, things like the house building industry, the telecoms industry, some of the petrol retailers. I don't think there is full and fair competition in those sectors. But again, that is a point of view. That's not a fact.
And very diplomatically and beautifully put, Liam Halligan. Will you come in your Mickey Mouse onesie next time?
I charge extra. Inflation, darling.
Right, don't forget to vote in our Twitter poll. We're asking you, is legal immigration into the UK too high, too low, or about right? Well, surprise, surprise, 82% of you think it is too high. At the moment, there is the vote. Please do vote in our poll. Well, it's pretty categorical right there, isn't it? As always, send me an email, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me at gbnews. Now, after the break, I'm going to be joined back in the studio by my brilliant guest, political commentator Emma Webb, and leader of the Climate Party, Ed Gamel. Lots to discuss, including our oceans being hotter than ever before, quite like a warm swim. See you in a few minutes.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Very good morning. It's 11:24 on Thursday. This is Bev Turner today on GB News. My guests are back with me, political commentator Emma Webb and leader of the Climate Party, Ed Gamel. Right, Emma, let's come to you first. Rishi Sunak's party political broadcast to the nation. He vowed to fix the challenges. Is he winning you over?
No, not at all. Firstly, I think that this broadcast was just dull as ditch water. The way that it was edited together was also very strange. It seemed like it had been really heavily edited. And I believe that this was also filmed before Christmas. So that's the reason why it's been criticised for not including anything to do with the strikes in it, but this is because it was filmed so long ago.
No wonder it's full of platitudes and cliches.
And I think the reasoning is that it's because he's basically pushed for time and is dealing with all of these other things, and that's why they felt, although this is something that you could turn around quite quickly, but obviously it's required quite a lot of spinning because it does seem to be, as I say, quite heavily edited.
I can't live in this world anymore.
And
Ed,
it says nothing meaningful.
How is it that the Prime Minister is so pushed for time that he has to do his party political broadcast like 3 months before it airs?
It sounds absolutely extraordinary. I mean, I have to confess...
What's he busy doing?
Oh, he's obviously extremely busy solving all the issues of the country. It's just we haven't seen the results yet. But anyway, I mean, to be honest on that, though, give him time. I mean, look, he's got to get his feet under the table and get on with it.
He was Chancellor of the Exchequer for a long time. He was.
Yes, he was. No, I'm not letting him off for that. I'm talking about in terms of going forward. I mean, I haven't seen it, but I'm reading the reports of it and that sort of thing. I mean, it sounds strange as well when we see a quote coming out of it saying, Britain will always be a place for global talent and those in dire need. I don't even understand why you talk about that in the same thing.
Middle.
Yeah, exactly, and no one in the middle. So you've either got to be of economic value to us or in absolutely dire need.
Well spotted.
But why you wouldn't divide...
The biggest transfer of wealth in history, more billionaires, more haves and have-nots. You're absolutely right, Emma. Maybe he was actually telling us the truth there.
He continues in that sentence by saying, but basic human decency must be accompanied by hard-headed common sense. And now I agree with him, and I agree with him saying that we need to deal with the channel boat crisis, we need to deal with the crisis in the NHS. But the fact is that he was in a position of influence as Chancellor already. Do we really believe that, as he claims, that these issues will stop under his government? Because it's, again, all it is just words, and we really need to, the proof is in the pudding. We need to see action, not just talking. And this broadcast seems to be the beginning of his campaign for re-election, I think, rather than anything that has any meat to it.
Yeah, go on, Ed.
I mean, I totally agree. I think think it's full of platitudes. I mean, from the reports, it just looks like platitudes to me. I think we're looking for some real leadership here. And I think when you had on the lady before, Leslie, and her particularly poignant and awful personal situation on the NHS, and I hope everybody's going to be praying for her and for her family, you see the issues that are affecting normal people in the streets straight away. I mean, even in a little way for myself, during these NHS strikes, I mean, I fell over when we had the ice. I fell over wearing my kilt, coming back from an event in London, and I fell over. 20 people ran over because I obviously looked like I really hit the ground.
Were you drunk, Ed?
No, I wasn't. No, not at all. Went home early, had one drink, etc. Been very good.
No.
It wasn't. It was an event that I'd gone to, and I was actually, on a pensions event. Very, very interesting, of course. And having gone to that in London, went home early, slipped straight over as I came out the station. 20 people ran over, and I cracked my rib. But as I got up, the first thing on my mind was, please don't make this be bad enough for me to go to A&E.
Yeah.
I was terrified of the idea that I might be 4 to 24 hours in A&E because it was bad, or that it could be worse than that. Actually, it's a cracked rib, and I've just suffered through it over the last weeks, and and it's okay.
Very stoic.
But,
but you're right. As we heard earlier, our relationship with the NHS has sort of changed so significantly at the moment. Like you say, we always dread having to go, but at the moment you dread having to go because you don't believe you're going to get the service that you're going to need. As our terrible story that we covered earlier. Right, we're going to talk about warm oceans, Ed. You know what I like? I like it when I go on holiday and the water's a little bit warmer to swim in.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, OK.
Is that bad?
Well, I mean, obviously you went by train to get there, didn't you, to make sure you didn't do like Rishi Sunak was and flew.
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean,
I'm not sure you can take a train to a warm ocean.
Well, you can to warmer anyway than we have here. So anyway, look, I mean, massive issue, but it's an illustration of the much bigger issue that's happening all around the planet. I mean, Europe and the UK had its hottest years on record last year. We've had 8 of the hottest years on the planet in the last 10 years.
You mean from the records that we have?
From the records that we have, OK, from the records that we have, yes. And we're not talking about going billions of years ago, but let's talk sort of records that are all post-industrial revolution and that sort of thing. So all human period of being in control. As the oceans warm, the biggest worry about it is that we get thermal expansion. So it expands, we see rising sea levels all around the country, and we're seeing lots of country and world. You've also got the fact that it will not absorb as much CO2. So the oceans have been absorbing quite a lot of that CO2 that we're pumping extra into the atmosphere on top of the natural cycles, and a lot of that's been going into the oceans. We won't see as much going into it. So we've got a big problem coming out of this at the moment. Now, from a UK perspective, we should be getting a grip. We should be taking the 2030 target to decarbonise and seeing it as leading the decarbonisation revolution as an opportunity to make profit and get prosperity for the country. Then we wouldn't have some of these issues we may have with the NHS, the cost of living crisis, pensions, and splitting the pot of money, because we'd be making more money. But if we delay, not only are we risking on the science side warmer and warmer oceans and worse effects in terms of weather, but we're missing out on the opportunity. I mean, we're paying China already for our solar panels. Germany is leading a lot of the eco-tech, and it shouldn't be them, it should be us. We need to get the right targets.
Emma Webb, as a self-confessed climate sceptic, not COVID, but that as well, but climate sceptic, is that a persuasive argument to you? To think, OK, if we have this, we are having a warming planet. If we can monetise this in a positive way whilst also protecting people's abilities to turn on the cooker, how is that bad?
Look, I love the environment. I love nature. I care about it. And I think that everybody should be doing everything they can to be a good custodian of the planet. So this is not an argument against that. But when it comes to the sorts of measures that are being recommended to combat the climate crisis, I think that those are, as you alluded to, at the cost of people's lives. And what we're seeing in the Netherlands at the moment, what we're seeing around the world with this sort of push to meet net zero targets, I think is anti-human. It views humanity as this sort of scourge on the planet and isn't considering people's lives, particularly those in poorer countries as well, those in countries that haven't fully industrialised yet. And so it's not to say that I don't think that we should be concerned about biodiversity and ecosystems within our oceans. I think all of those things are very important. But the way in which I'm sceptical is that in general, not just in relation to this, I'm sceptical about the impact that human beings have and our power to control things, to control the situation that we live in.
Yeah.
And so whilst I think it's important for us to be good custodians, what I would urge against is, like I said earlier, this kind of catastrophism that leads us into what seem to me to be ill thought through anti-human policies.
While the oceans are running hotter, that must make your blood run colder, Ed.
Yes, or hotter, depends on which way you look at it. But yeah, I mean, and see, Emma says a lot of sensible things about being good custodians, of course, but that's not the point. The point is to take advantage of the opportunity. It's coming down the road anyway. Every single country is going to decarbonise. They've all got net zero plans in place already. The weather impact's getting worse, so they're going to bring them forward. We should be at the front, running it and doing it, and it should be done now.
All right. OK, time for another quick break. I'm going to be joined by Conservative MP Miriam Cates. She's a huge advocate of the online safety bill, getting it right and getting it through. I'm going to be discussing with Miriam if the big tech companies should be held accountable for harmful content that appears on their platforms. That's all after your morning news.
It's 11:32. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. And some breaking news in the last few minutes. A strike by 100,000 civil servants will go ahead on February the 1st. That's after a meeting between the Health Secretary and health leaders being described as a total farce by the PCS union. Well, that as the government had called the meeting good and constructive. It comes as new NHS England data shows ambulances took an hour and a half on average to respond to call-outs in December. That's the longest times on record. The latest figures also found the number of people waiting more than 12 hours to be admitted to A&E has risen above 50,000 for the first time. The Irish Premier and Labour leader are meeting political parties at Stormont today in a bid to resolve the row over the Northern Ireland Protocol. Leo Varadkar and Sir Keir Starmer are discussing the post-Brexit deadlock over trade rules on the Irish land border. The DUP's blocking the formation of a government until the protocol's dramatically altered or removed. Russian mercenaries are claiming to have found a body belonging to one of the 2 British aid workers missing in Ukraine. The Wagner Group hasn't specified which of the 2's reportedly been found, but did claim they had documents belonging to both Brits. Ukrainian police say Andrew Bagshaw and Christopher Parry were last seen heading to the town of Soledar on Friday in Ukraine. They were reported missing on Saturday evening. GB News is unable to verify the claims. And King Charles is carrying out his first public engagement today since the release of Prince Harry's memoir, Spare. The King is in Aberdeenshire visiting the Aboyne and Mid-Deeside Community Shed, where he's touring its new facilities and meeting local support groups. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Bev will be back in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Very good morning. It's 11:37. This is Bev Turner today on GB News. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, we talked about the online safety bill quite a lot on this programme because the internet can be a pretty lawless environment, especially for children, with many parents worried about their kids' safety. About 3,500 online child sex offences are recorded by police every month, and it was revealed that children on social media platform TikTok have been exposed to suicide content within 3 minutes of joining. This is just one example. So the need for more protections in this area, one could say, is pretty urgent. But should big tech giants be held accountable for the harmful contents shared on their platforms, or is this up to parents? Well, joining me now is Conservative MP for Penistone and Stocksbridge, friend of the show, Miriam Kay. It's lovely to see you, Miriam. Now, I read your piece. You wrote a really great piece in The Telegraph about this, and you said for children, the internet is a modern Wild West, a lawless and predatory environment where they daily encounter content intended to draw them into self-harm, addiction and sexual abuse. Some might say, well, that's a bit of an exaggeration, Miriam. It's not that bad, is it? There's a lot of good on the internet. How would you respond?
Oh, of course there is good on the internet, but I think the problem is that it's so unregulated at the moment that there's also an awful lot of harm. And of course, we're all aware of the tragic cases of children who sadly took their own lives, like Molly Russell. But it's not just a handful of individuals. All children who are online and on social media are being pushed by these harmful algorithms with, content that is just beyond our imagination as adults in terms of the harm that it's doing. And we all know about these algorithms. So just as a kind of little example, I'm quite a big fan of the Princess of Wales, and I've looked at some of her things on Instagram, and now Instagram constantly sends me videos and pictures of the Princess of Wales. Well, that's fine. But imagine if that was content that was tempting me into self-harm and I was a child. We know that it's not just kind of the odd case of a harmful image or a harmful idea, but these images, these ideas, this content is being pushed relentlessly on our children, and it is having untold harms. And I think the public is becoming increasingly aware of that.
So with the online safety bill, will that include any sort of restrictions on those kind of algorithms that you're describing?
Well, it will make sure that tech bosses are accountable for allowing those algorithms to knowingly harm children. So the bill as it stands, so the bill as drafted, does introduce some fairly significant fines for tech companies that fail in their child safety duties, but it doesn't have any personal criminal liability for the tech directors. And we can see the weakness of this approach in, for example, the Molly Russell case, because at the inquest, Instagram executives, admitted that they knew about these algorithms, that they knew they were pushing this really destructive content to vulnerable children. And even they defended the content, which is quite astounding. But under the bill as it stands, the only thing that they would be guilty of is a failure to share information, data with Ofcom. No individual would actually be criminally liable for allowing children to come to harm. And that's quite unthinkable in a civilized society. Imagine if a driver could hit a child and drive off and face no criminal sanctions. I mean, we've seen similar legislation in other industries, like the construction industry. If someone has an accident, maybe dies on a building site, an individual as well as a company can be held criminally liable. So we believe that without that kind of teeth, the online safety bill just will not have the protective effect that it's meant to have.
Have you got support from many MPs for that amendment to the bill, Miriam?
Yes, we've got very strong support. So obviously this is a Conservative amendment in the name of myself and Sir Bill Cash, who is an absolute hero on child protection. So we've got, I think we have officially got 36 Conservative MPs signed up to this, but we know we are accumulating more. And we understand that the Labour Party will back us because they have themselves tried to introduce similar amendments along these lines during the passage of the bill. Most recently in December, Dame Margaret Hodge tried to introduce an amendment in the House of Commons. So yes, we've got increasing support from Conservative backbenchers who all see that this is our final opportunity to strengthen the bill. And so the government is taking it seriously. We're talking to the Secretary of State, to the department, and we want to work with them, but the guarantees have to be strong enough.
Yesterday, Labour MP Alex Davies-Jones suggested that Rishi Sunak should act on Andrew Tate, the misogyny spread in schools. What do you think about that? We're kind of moving into this area where we feel like the government should just be involved in everything.
Yes, I mean, this is a really difficult one, but it fits very well with the topic of the online safety bill, because I think, firstly, Andrew Tate has clearly been going through a criminal process in Romania. We can't preempt that. But certainly what he's been accused of is appalling. And if he is guilty of those crimes, then, we should question whether he should be having influence over young boys. But we've also got to understand why there is the demand for that content and, what young boys are kind of missing in their lives in order to want to kind of explore those ideas. And that's a much bigger societal debate. And my concern, as you know from other things that I've been involved in, is that schools are actually not giving children, kind of neutral political information. They are coming down very much on one particular side, let's say. I mean, I'm not talking about this issue maybe, but on, on the gender debate. And that's damaging too. We need to be age appropriate, but also politically neutral.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Andrew Tate story is interesting. Why have young men sought him out? That is a big question. Miriam Cates, Conservative MP, thank you so much for joining me. Keep us updated, won't you? I know you're working very hard on the bill, and we're always happy to speak to you. Now,
brilliant. Thanks, Bev.
Thanks, Miriam. OK, earlier I spoke to Leslie Weekly. This was the widow who tragically lost her husband, Rob, during the period of ambulance strikes and with the NHS being on its knees. We spoke about the real and very distressing repercussions of the actions of workers striking during this period. Viewer discretion is advised. This is a really upsetting and heartbreaking story.
My husband woke me up about 1 o'clock saying he had indigestion. Can I get him a couple of tablets, which I did. But when I went to give them to him, he was slurring his words and he was almost incoherent and he was clammy and sweaty and ice cold. So I just straight away picked my phone up and dialed 999. And they said, well, a clinician will ring you back. If he deteriorates, ring us back. And I did that. Every time I rang, I said, he's deteriorating, he's getting worse. A clinician will ring you. If he deteriorates, ring back. And then the third time I rang, I said, I can't feel his pulse. And I didn't know then he was still breathing, but I didn't know then what that meant. But the paramedics told me his body was shutting down and it was the heart's way of protecting itself to take blood from the extremities. And that's why I couldn't get a pulse. And then on the 6th phone call, still no phone call from the clinician. He stopped breathing while I was on the phone, and I dragged him off the bed and started doing CPR. And I was doing it for about 20 minutes, and I was exhausted. It's so hard to do, and I wasn't sure I was doing it correctly in the end because there was no strength left in my arms. And the awful thing was the ambulances park up on a road near us. They join with the fire service, and the paramedics left about 5:30, I think. And my friend went to work at 5:50 past the ambulance park, and there were 15 ambulances there. We've just become a statistic, and the more this goes out, the more you hear of people going through more or less the same thing. And why can't all the political parties get together, not just the one that's in power at the moment, but all of them, and just make radical changes?
Awful, tragic. The human face of these disputes at the moment, so moving. And we really, really thank Leslie again for talking to us. Now, let me reintroduce my guest to you this morning, political commentator Emma Webb, leader of the Climate Party, Ed Gemmell. Right, and also your views. Let me just go to a couple of those as well. I keep asking you for them, and it's remiss of me not to get to them. Kelly has said no more Tories or Labour, all their broken promises, and they are for themselves. Steve from Donny has said the trouble is Sunak's speech. This was the party political broadcast that he did yesterday. It's all talking and no walking. The public are sick of it, most probably not listening to them now. And this was about Christmas trading. We had Liam Halligan in the studio a moment ago saying that the Christmas figures had been really good. John says Tesco's report in the second successive quarter of growth does that show that they are overcharging customers during the cost of living crisis. Price gouging, Liam said that's called. That was a new one to me. Apparently not. No evidence of that. Couldn't possibly accuse any supermarkets of doing that. Now, Emma, a lot of people are off work. They don't want to go to work. And so what is the government's solution?
This is a very, very interesting story. So this is basically suggesting that people who are currently claiming sickness benefits, and now, as a caveat to this, I'm not sure why they're focusing on people who are out of work because of ill health when there are lots of people who are out of work for other reasons. There was recently a story about younger people who had no plans at all whatsoever to go into work or to work at any point in their lives. So I'm not sure why they're focusing on the sick. But this story is claiming that those who are on sickness benefits will be able to return to work while still claiming sickness benefits and will be offered tax breaks for getting jobs for the first couple of years that they're working. And what strikes me about this is so strange, and maybe I'm misunderstanding the story, is that this is supposed to be a reform to deal with our the perverse incentives that people have to stay out of work. But this in itself seems a bit perverse. A government source, as I think many people will be thinking at home, a government source has pointed out that surely this is going to cause resentment for those in work. Surely those who are already working could do with some tax cuts. So I'm not sure how this is going to solve the problem. It seems that this actually might create even more problems, possibly even worse problems in terms of the incentives that they're offering people.
Yeah. So apparently since the pandemic, successful disability claims are up 70%. And the Office for Budget Responsibility has said that as a result of long-term sickness benefits will cost the taxpayers £3.7 billion more than previously estimated this year, rising to £8.2 billion by 2027. How is this a Conservative government, Ed?
I find it absolutely extraordinary. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I find the whole story completely baffling, but I also find the whole issue a complete conundrum. I mean, you're going to pay people extra to get them back to work, potentially alienating those who've been in work and have been working all the way through. Then you're going to come to the point where we don't have enough money to do it, because inevitably we're not going to have enough money to do everything that we're doing anyway. So then you're going to have to pull those benefits, or you're going to have to pay the other ones more, but the minute you do that, the hole gets bigger financially. I don't see a happy ending to this. I mean, I would like to look at it in a slightly different way, although I think this is now just currently sort of dreaming and imagination, is maybe we need to be looking at the whole thing a bit different, like a national mission. I know I'd mentioned climate, but let's keep it general. A national mission for where we want to go as a country, and then engage people with that. Maybe we need to be going to one of the top advertising agencies and saying, look, we need a national mission, we need to be able to communicate it properly and bring everybody on board with us.
Oh, they don't need to go to an advertising agency and spend billions on that, Ed Gemmell. Emma Webb and I could come up with it between us. I'm sure we could.
I'm sure you could.
Work hard, get out of bed in the morning, don't go to work if you're sick. If you are sick, stay at home, but don't expect to be sick and go to work and get sickness benefit.
Common sense.
Honestly.
It sounds like common sense, but we're trying to incentivise it here with billions going one way or the other while we alienate people who are working, which seems very, very difficult to balance.
It does feel like the benefit system is in such a mess. We're just handing out money hand over fist. We've got the highest tax burden in 70 years, hitting all of us in the pockets who are working hard. I have to sort of, I don't know.
And the atmosphere that creates as well by ramping up taxes so much, it's hardly going to create an economically productive culture, an economically productive environment when people feel that they're working for most of their money to simply be taken away by the government. So younger people, as we were discussing before, with pensions and younger people's attitude towards money, home ownership, starting a family, all of these sorts of things, all of this is disempowering and demotivating. And so, like I said, that story about younger people who just simply don't plan to go into work at all, they should be focusing their energies not on those people who are sick. And apparently this rise in people on benefits has been driven by mental health conditions. Rather than focusing on these people, they should be focusing on creating an economically productive culture, because at the moment, even just COVID, the effect of COVID, people working from home, people deciding to leave their jobs, particularly older people, and to leave the jobs market entirely. The impact of that culturally and psychologically on people is profound.
Seismic. Absolutely seismic. Right, let's talk about Rishi Sunak flying by taxpayer-funded private plane to Leeds for an NHS visit. I promise you, I'm not just looking for stories out of which Rishi Sunak does badly, but they just keep coming. Ed, go.
I mean, just ridiculous. I mean, honestly, he went there for a face of opportunity at a care home. Why couldn't he have done it somewhere close to home in the first place? If it really was just a face of opportunity, there didn't seem to be anything else for it, at least from the story. The next thing is the money that's being spent on that. I mean, for goodness sake, why aren't we putting that money into making our railways better? And whether or not that's trying to solve the strike issues we've got at the moment or actually improve technically the railways, we should be doing one of them instead of spending it on this. Absolutely ridiculous. And the idea that he's saving time, why couldn't he do some work on the train like the rest of us?
Well, the train from London to Leeds takes around 2 hours and 15 minutes, a standard class available for about £100. OK, but he chose to take a private jet, a luxury business jet, to do the 200-mile journey. Emma?
I actually find it quite hard to get riled up about this story.
What?
And so, on the one hand, yes, completely, there are so many ways in which the government are spending an enormous amount of money on things that they shouldn't be, and that we are being taxed up to our eyeballs so that they can spend this money on pointless things. So I can understand why people are angry about that aspect of it. But this story itself, I feel, is a distraction from so many more important... Even what we were discussing about the NHS and that poor lady who had to witness her husband dying before her eyes because the ambulance didn't send the paramedics. There are so many things that we should be talking about, and I think that there's always this temptation for these sort of hit stories to nitpick about certain politicians' behaviour, as with Rishi and him using private healthcare, which I think also was a silly story.
Oh, a stupid story. I couldn't.
So I understand why people are angry about the money aspect of this.
But isn't it tone
But I think it's
deaf?
a distraction.
It is tone deaf.
I think the whole government are tone deaf.
They are tone deaf. They have emergency services. We have nurses striking because they can't fill the fridge at home. And here we have Rishi Sunak telling us to live a green life and to be all environmentally friendly. And then he gets a private jet to Leeds.
I mean, having said that,
the problem is the hypocrisy.
Absolutely, well, I agree with you, but are you actually surprised? I mean, look, it was a COP27 only a month or two before. We signed a second time an agreement to phase down coal. So we signed that, and then we're opening a Cumbrian coal mine. So we signed an agreement saying we're phasing down coal, an international agreement, and within weeks we give permission for a Cumbrian coal mine. I mean, how ridiculous. This is just illustrative
Maybe he
of that.
just didn't want to face the railway workers.
Maybe that's why he didn't get on the train.
Possibly.
At least go in a car. Like, even the car would... Just
Sure.
a taxpayer-funded private jet to Leeds for a photo opportunity. He needs to justify that.
And look, he can work in the car. I'm happy to drive him. He can work in the back on the way there.
And you know what? Our very clever viewer who said earlier, it's all the talk and none of the walk. That's the point. Don't talk about your values and your platitudes and your stupid videos and then go and do that.
Even if it is the case that he's pushed for time, then this is something that should have been cut out of his schedule.
Yeah.
They should have found another way to do it.
A care home in the middle of London,
if you could,
for the sake
you know
of it.
what, if you're short of time, talk to some nurses today. They'll tell you what being short of time looks like. But, and on that beautiful segue, we have run out of time. Emma Webb, Ed Gemmell, thank you so much. Lovely to see you. Thank you also for all of your messages today. If you've not had enough of me yet, you might have done. But for my mum and dad, I'm hosting Mark Stein's show tonight. So I'll be back on your telly this evening, 7 till 8. We've been asking you about illegal immigration. Legal immigration, 81% of you think that it is too high. That was because we had a couple of experts earlier talking about the benefit or the cost to Great Britain. Right, thank you so much. It's flown by again. Coming up next is GB News Live with Stephen Dixon. I'm Bev Turner. I'll see you this evening at 7.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. Wet weather in the south clearing away today. Blustery showers across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some sunny spells in between. Here's the big picture. Low pressure is dominating, and these weather fronts brought some fairly heavy rain through the morning and still some downpours to come across parts of southern England through the afternoon. Moving through, though, and clearing away slowly but surely. Still pretty blustery as well. A few showers